doing? We're going to deep dive right away. It's really cool because so far I've had a couple people who have come to me and said, wow, I watched your YouTube and it spoke to me because I've had some of these questions, or I've been wondering this very thing. And I think that's amazing. I think that is probably a big reason why God is having me do this, is because there's so many people that wonder this stuff. And one of my friends, she asked me, she said, April, why does God let people suffer, especially children? She said, I have a grandchild who has dwarfism, these different things where he can't communicate, can't speak. He had a surgery to work on some of the other medical things, and after that surgery, she said he just seemed to be like the speaking stopped. He had actually been able to, they'd heard him say daddy, and then after the surgery it just stopped. And she goes, how can all of this, because there's other medical things, and she was like, how can all of this be put on such a little person, and why does God allow that? And she actually asked me, does God have control of that? And do not take this as me trying to say I have all the answers. I know exactly what's going to make you feel better. I know exactly how to take care of all this. I don't. But this is why I want to talk about some of this stuff, is because sometimes delving into it with other people or hearing their perspectives can help. It's just that human connection, but then also what I feel like God wants us to do. Not suffer alone, not try to deal with everything by ourselves. So let's kind of dive into this whole subject matter of why does God do these things that affect us as human beings, that not only as an adult are hard to understand, but how do you explain this to a child who is suffering and has to go through this stuff and doesn't have really the understanding or the maturity yet to understand it. So they just have to deal with this. Is it an easy answer? No, it's not. Is it something that, let's talk about this and it'll go away? No, it's not. It's interesting because this book I actually listened to several times. I started it in South Carolina and listened to it a couple times there. But then since being back, I've listened to it. It's just so amazing. And every time I listen to it, I pull more things out of it. It's actually called Why Did God Do That? And it is by, I have to look at my notes, so excuse me. The book is by Matthew Tingblad and Josh McDowell. And again, it's called Why Did God Do That? And it explains so much. I would recommend this book highly to anyone who's just become a Christian, but also someone who might be thinking, okay, I've heard about this God and stuff like that, but what is he about? I think they would find this book very illuminating. I don't care how long you've been a Christian, how much you've delved into the Word and stuff like that. This book is incredible. And so I would highly, highly recommend it. They have a lot of knowledge. They've gone into the Bible, dug into it, finding what those ancient words in Greek or Hebrew or, whatever, through the translations, what they actually mean. Because there's some things that we take in English that mean something different or meant something different. The culture, the customs, just the different things, and it explains that very well. I put a lot of thought into this friend of mine's question, and it made me think about a lot of the different things that happen in our lives. If we boil it down to a nutshell, God created us But he wanted us to have free will. Because if you create something, I mean, I can build a robot and it can do exactly what I want it to. Your computer does what you program it to. Programs, things like that. They do what you want it to. Whatever you tell it to. But does your computer love you? I don't think so. Does that robot actually love you? No. Does it choose to do what you tell it to do? It doesn't have that choice. It just does it. It's what it's programmed to do. We as human beings were created. If God was just a power-hungry God, he could have made us all just be completely subservient to him. And I find it interesting also because actually this thought just popped into my head. Even the angels. I mean, you look at Satan, and it says that when Satan rebelled against God, he took 1/3 of the angels with him from heaven. So in a way, they had the free will to do what they want. And so all these beings that God has created, free will. But in that free will, that's huge. The will to do what we want. And it's like God saying, I want you to love me. I'm creating you. I'm creating all this stuff for you, all this beautiful world, everything for Adam and Eve. Everything that you could ever want. You don't even have to toil for it. You don't have to hardly work for it. And none of the animals are going to hurt you. And, just everything. But yet, in that free will, Eve and Adam chose the very thing that God said not to choose. Hey, you can have all this, everything in the world, everything. You are master over it. He even brought all the animals for Adam to name. I mean, just everything. And they chose just the simple act of disobedience. Don't eat of this fruit. And they did. That is what brings about then all the suffering in the world. Because then we have that sin nature. We no longer got to commune with God as Adam and Eve did. And Satan told them, your eyes will be opened. But that was a protection. That was a protection kind of encompassed in God's love for us. Just do this and don't do this one thing and you will be protected and your life will be amazing. But they had to find out what this one little thing was. And that brought in the sin nature. That brought in, that's why the animals no longer were friendly. They became afraid of human beings. Thorns, the work that goes into crops and procuring food and shelter and all of that. And how does that fit in with this little boy? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, oh, well, it's his sin nature and so it's his punishment. That's not what it is. However, in all of the things that humans have done, and in the idea and the fact that the world is fallen, it was no longer God's perfect world for us. It was no longer God's perfect realm for us. And we destroyed that. I say we because any one of us would have chosen. I mean, that it's perfectly illustrated. If you can go back and look at your life and say, I've never done one thing wrong. Even when you're a kid, I've never done one thing wrong. Well then, yeah, I guess you can say that, well, I wouldn't have eaten that apple. But every single one of us has done something. So every single one of us has proven, really, that we would have done the same thing that Adam and Eve did. So then with that comes the disease, the things that came from the non-perfect world. The world that we pretty much ushered in with sin, with our free will. And I mean, you can say Adam and Eve ushered in, yes, but we would have done it as well. Hence you have, the genetic factors, the different things, the different sins that have led to the different, diseases or things, the lifestyles that some people live, just those things. And again, I'm not saying that this is why this little boy has these medical issues is because of something their parents did or something that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are factors that come from living in a non-perfect world. But why would God do this? Why would God, allow this to happen? Especially, this boy didn't do anything. It's a super huge, deep subject, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to cover it all in one little video and say, hey, there you go. That would be great. But I think there's so much involved in it. I look at the different things that have happened to different people in different places. One of the examples that actually popped into my mind was Corrie ten Boom. I don't know if you've heard of her. She was Danish, I believe. Anyway, she was around a teenager during the time of World War II. And her father was a watchmaker, and he had this secret compartment. And when the Jews would be looking for places to hide, he hid them. And so they actually ended up saving about 800 Jews from being caught by the Nazis and killed. But they did end up getting caught. Here it is. They're doing something that is God's will. They're not just sitting by and, hey, I'm not Jewish and I don't want anything. I'm washing my hands of this. I'm not hurting these people, but I'm not getting involved. I don't want my family getting hurt. Instead, her father stepped out and hid all these Jews, knowing if I get caught, I'm probably going to get killed. And yet they did it anyway. So why did God allow them to get caught? And then they get put in concentration camps. And Corrie ten Boom and her sister Betsy, they got sent to Ravensbrück, anyway, I believe that's how you pronounce it. And I don't know how much you know about the Holocaust and how much you know about those concentration camps. A lot of people do know a lot of stuff about them. I've watched a ton of stuff, a ton of documentaries, and they were awful. If you think about the fear, not just every single day, every single moment, that you're going to be beaten, that you're going to be killed, you can be raped, you're gonna watch your family members that could have any of that done to you. The people that you are subject to, they care nothing about you. They think that you are less than human. There's not even that thing of that little kernel of human kindness. This is you're like an animal. We don't really care. We have to exterminate you. And God allowed them to go through that. In fact, Betsy, Corrie's younger sister, younger or older, anyway, her sister ends up dying just a couple days before they get liberated. I believe she died of tuberculosis, which was rampant in those camps. And because, these people a lot of them didn't have shoes and they were working out in the snow and the horrible conditions. Awful, awful, awful every day. Awful. You wake up, and it's funny because every day we complain about this or that, our job, our circumstances, and yet these people woke up in horrible conditions. They slept in horrible conditions, and their day wasn't something like, hey, I have this to look forward to and that to look forward to. It was get up, go stand in this formation while these people decide if they want to beat you, and then they send you out to this hard labor, and that's what you do. And you get fed like the bare minimum of sustenance, which really wasn't even that. So many people starved to death in these camps. Just awful conditions. And what I find interesting is Betsy ends up praying for the Nazis. In fact, when the Nazi German fighter pilots were flying over and they were seeing some of the battles going on, the air battles, she prayed for the German pilots because she was like, these souls are important to God too. There's a thing where Corrie ten Boom talks about in her book. She talks about that they ended up thanking God for the fleas, and that her sister would pray for the very Nazi guard that had just beaten her or had beaten their friend. That's incredible. That is, I can't say I would do that. I can have a horrible attitude at dumb things that really don't matter that much. But if you could say that anybody has an excuse to have a horrible attitude, I would put them right up there as people that could have a horrible attitude, and we would all be like, no, I get it. I get it. So God allowed this stuff to happen, but he also used all of that. They saved 800 Jews. And then the stories, the attitude that her sister had, and the attitude that Corrie had, and just what they did in that concentration camp, that bore witness. And she was able to witness and bring a lot of other people to the Lord through that suffering, through the testimony of that suffering, through the testimony of what they were like during that suffering. It's incredible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you kind of stew on some of the things that I've said. You can disagree, you can ask more questions, whatever you want to do. But I don't want this to be super, super long. But I want to be able to delve into the different things. So I'm going to call this part 1. And I will go, of course, there's so much more to be said about this. I think it's important, and I think that we all have different things that we come across in our life. We're like, why? Why is this happening? This does not seem fair to this person, or to that person, or to me, myself. It doesn't seem fair. I want to get into all of that because I feel like there's not just a cut and dried answer to say, hey, you're suffering and you should be thankful during it. And that's easy to say, and that's not where I'm going as far as with this whole, the story of Corrie ten Boom and stuff. I'm not saying, hey, yes, he's suffering, be thankful, quit complaining. Not at all. Don't take it as that at all, please. I'll explain a little more, of course, coming up. I'm trying to get some different angles that I have kind of come across in my life, and I'll share more of that in part 2. So I hope that you end up coming back for part 2. And I appreciate you being here and listening to this. Also, again, I want to recommend that book, Why Did God Do That? That is such a good book. It is so good. It helped me so much in understanding God's love and a lot of different things. So, all right, we'll get into part 2 very soon. Thank you.